January 3rd, 2026, Buddha Dhamma, Part 2 of 11.3, page 1000 or page 1093. The middle of the page, point D, happiness from scratching an itch, and happiness from the itch being cured. To help review the Buddha perspective on happiness, sukha, let us examine once more the passages in the Magga Sutra. This teaching outlines the development of sukha, of happiness, beginning with pleasures experienced by infants up to the supreme bliss of Nibbita, nirvana, or nibbana. Nibbita. In this sutra, Gautama Buddha describes the pursuit and experience of various kinds of sukha in people's lives. To begin with, a newly born infant lying in the cradle may giggle and find delight by smearing its own urine and excrement. A few years later, the child no longer finds pleasure in such activity. Rather, he or she likes to play in a sandbox or in dirt and enjoy playing with toys like dolls or miniature cars, trains, or airplanes. Children find tremendous delight in toys, cherishing and clinging to them. Upatana. Some children have a favorable blanket, and no matter how ragged or soiled it is, they cherish it intensely. If someone asks to take it away from them, they'll scream as if their life depended on it. Children then develop into young adults, at which time these toys are no longer considered amusing. They provide them no pleasure or satisfaction. Instead, people derive another level of pleasure from enjoyment by way of sense contact, by way of sights, by way of sounds, by way of smells, by way of tastes, and by way of tangible objects. From here, sukha, happiness, can be developed further. If people fail to develop higher forms of happiness and stop at the level of sense pleasures, before long they will experience an inevitable despair. Or at the very least, they will no longer be able to enjoy these pleasures and will encounter great suffering and affliction. Those people who develop higher forms of sukha, happiness, experience a refined joy independent of pleasurable sense objects. They reach a free, unrestrained happiness and becomes truly liberated. When these liberated individuals observe others who indulge in sense pleasures, they no longer consider this enjoyment of sense pleasures as a form of satisfaction. Their attitude towards sense pleasures has changed, similar to how an adult looks at children delighting in their toys. Although they understand this delight, they look upon it with humor or sympathy. As mentioned earlier, Gautama Buddha used the metaphor of a leper to describe the development of happiness. Lepers feel extreme itchiness due to the disease. As a result, they scratch at their lesions, yet their scratching only intensifies this itch. The more they scratch, the more they itch. The more they itch, the more they scratch. Moreover, nevertheless, they derive the sense pleasures from scratching. Because of this discomfort, they also seek relief by burning their lesions by fire. They find happiness and satisfaction by burning themselves, which ordinary people would find intolerable. Gautama Buddha once asked a Brahmin what would happen if a leper met a doctor with effective medicine, resulting in the cure of illness. Would this person cure of leprosy, still seek happiness from scratching, or desire to burn himself with a flame? The Brahmin answered that just the opposite would occur. If someone were to grab this man and pull him towards the flame, he would struggle desperately to escape. Gautama Buddha pointed out how the development of happiness, sukha, is similar. Someone who has experienced a happiness superior to sense pleasure no longer considers the enjoyment of sense objects as a source of satisfaction. One can say that a significant percentage of human beings derive happiness, sukha, from scratching the itch. Those people who develop themselves to another level derive sukha, happiness, from freedom from itching. Consider which of these kinds of sukha, kinds of happiness, is superior. Does a healthy person free from illness consider the state of health, the state of well-being, to be happiness? Is it not such freedom from illness, freedom from affliction, freedom from chafing, itching, and physical pain a true state of happiness? The state of physical health, free from weakness and irritation, in which all of one's organs function well, is an inherent state of happiness. Indeed, such health, such freedom from affliction is a basic, preliminary form of happiness aspired by all people. No matter what sort of happiness people aim for, and no matter how abundant their material possessions, they are derived of physical health. Their objects of sense pleasures gradually lose importance, regardless of how bountiful are their objects of sense pleasure. If people are impaired or ravaged by physical illness, these things lose all their value. Moreover, if their happiness, sukha, was invested in these things, the illness will only intensify suffering and lead to sickness of heart. Let us turn our attention to the mind. A mind that is satisfied, spacious, joyous, and bright, free from vexation and disturbance, is inherently complete. Such a state of mind is itself sukha, happiness. In the same way as physical health is a form of happiness, in fact, this sukha, this happiness, is even greater than that of physical health. But because of the mind's refinement, most people find difficulty gaining an insight into it. Take an example of someone in a rude health. If he or she is in great mental distress, no amount of material comforts can provide him or her with happiness. In contrast, people whose minds are bright, cheerful, free and happy, even when nothing is happening, and when they abide in most ordinary and routine circumstances, they are happy. Point E, enjoyment of sense pleasures without affliction. Normally speaking, sense pleasure and more refined kinds of sukha, happiness, are incompatible. This is because sense pleasure is tied up with arousing and stimulating sense objects simultaneously, accompanied by agitation and anxiety dependent on external things for gratification. Refined happiness, sukha, on the other hand, begins at a peace of mind. The happiness of concentration, absorption, of jhana, for example, arises when the mind is first secluded from sensuality and secluded from unwholesome states. Therefore, it is difficult for ordinary people to enjoy both sense pleasures and more refined forms of sukha, happiness, especially if the sukha, happiness of concentration, absorption, jhana, because whether they delight in, they also tend to attach to and indulge in. When they are agitated and confused by the power of sense desire, tanha, it is difficult for them to enter into the happiness of jhana, concentration, absorption. There are many stories of hermits, ascetics, sadhus, and renunciants falling away from concentration absorption because of the infatuation for sense pleasure. Only when one is a noble being, beginning with a sotapanna, a stream enter, one who has realized the stream, can one enjoy sense pleasures safely, freely, without any hindrances. For this reason, Gautama Buddha repeatedly encouraged people to develop panya, wisdom, and have a proper relationship to sense pleasures, only when they can escape from this power and influence. In the Pasarasi Sutta, Gautama Buddha compares the 5 objects of sense pleasures to a hunter's snare. This teaching pertains to the three groups of ascetics and Brahmins. First group, those ascetics and Brahmins who enjoy the five cores of sensuality, kama guna, with attachment, infatuation, and indulgence without a discernment of their dangers and without liberating wisdom, they are similar to a deer captured in a snare. They will meet with a downfall and destruction, slaughtered by the hunter, evil-minded Mara hosts. The second group, those ascetics and Brahmins who enjoy the five cores of sensuality without attachment, infatuation, and indulgence, with a discernment of their dangers and with a liberating wisdom. They are similar to a deer lying on top of the snare, but not caught in it. They do not meet with downfall and destruction and are not subject to being carried off by the hunter. The third group, those bhikkhus, monks, sadhus, siddhis, who have secluded from sensuality, secluded from unwholesome states, akusala dhamma, unwholesome states, who have attained a level of fine material and immaterial jhana, along with nirodha, the cessation of perception and feeling. So, cessation from sanya and vedana. Sanya, veta, niyata, nirodha, who have brought the mental taints, asavas, to the end, who have experienced supreme sukha, happiness. They are called those who are not blinded by Mara hosts, who consequently cannot see any trace of the illusion in them. They are similar to a deer who wander freely and at ease in the great forest, undetected by the hunter. From this sutra, one can see that Gautama Buddha did not simply teach and abandon an involvement with objects of sense pleasure. He also taught a proper engagement to these things by maintaining an independence in relation to them. One does not become enslaved by them. One does not permit them to cause harm and create dukkha, suffering. The involvement with sense objects belong to the second group of ascetics and Brahmins above, the way of practice most emphasized for general Dhamma practitioners. The key principle in this way of practice to encapsulate it in the term with liberating panya, liberating of wisdom, which is translated of the Pali language, nissarana panya. It refers to wisdom that knows how to lead one to freedom. It can also be defined as wisdom escaping the enticement by tanha, by craving, or wisdom preventing entrapment by tanha, by craving. Commentaries generally define as nissarana panya as the ability to reflect when using the four requisites, by focus on the true purpose, the true benefit, the true value of these things. This is why we put pati sankhayo niso, the four requisites, so forth. For example, one uses the clothing or the cloth primarily to ward off the heat, the wind, and biting insects, to cover only the private parts, not for boasting or for showing. One eats food in order to keep moderation, the body strong and at ease, so that one can perform one's activities, not for amusement, nor for extravagance. The application of such wise reflection, yo niso manasikara, wise reflection, fosters interdependence, prevents enslavements to material objects, and helps to avoid the dangers of dukkha, suffering, stemming from spinning around in the vortex of moodiness, samsara vata, of rebirth, of joy and sorrow, pleasure and disappointment. Moreover, it generates a balanced use of the requisites, which is a boon, a gift for one's life. Practice endowed with liberating wisdom, nissarana panya, is thus referred to as knowledge of moderation. Someone who relates properly to sense pleasures will find it easy to assess more refined forms of happiness, and such happiness depended on wholesome states of mind, kusala dhamma, which one has experienced, refined sukha, refined happiness. This sukha, this happiness, then in turn, to guide one's search for and partaking of sense pleasure, keeping it within correct boundaries. This is because one appreciates the value of more refined happiness. When one reaches higher states of realization, comprised of even more profound forms of happiness, one will not return to seek out sense pleasures again. Point F, liberated enjoyment of sense pleasures. Noble disciples, Arya Savaka, are endowed with liberating panya, nitsarana panya. They enjoy sensual or material pleasures with thorough understanding, preserving an inner freedom, avoiding enslavement by material things. They use and consume things by recognizing both their benefits as well as their potential harm. They are able to manage things and manage affairs in a way that leads to well-being of themselves, their families, their companions, and their dependents, their co-workers, their communities, and indeed the entire society. Moreover, they are aware, both in regard to themselves and to others, of how progress and development on the noble path, Arya Magga. In reference to monks or monastic residents who aim for higher forms of sukha, happiness and freedom, Gautama Buddha taught to abandon sensual desire and to pass beyond material things. But in reference to the householders, he did not emphasize the abstinence from sensuality. Instead, he emphasized managing and consumption of material things and dwelling in contentment in the way that it is safe from ill effects, conductive to the greatest beings for oneself and others. Of course, liberating panya, liberating wisdom, is also a key element for householders. Lay people, both in respect to enjoying sense object, kama boja, safely in a way conductive to benefit and free from affliction, and to the guiding one to greater levels of well-being, the Gautama Buddha thus emphasized the constant application of such wisdom in the engagements with all things, by clearly recognizing three principal factors. First principal factor, the benefits of it. The second beneficial factors, the dangers of it. And the third principal factors, and the escape of it. In other words, the advantages, the drawbacks or faults, and the point of deliverance and freedom, which constitutes a state of completion, transcending both the advantages and disadvantages that are still inseparably bound by one another. By teaching lay people sound judgment or sound application, who has either no understanding or only a basic understanding of the Buddha's teaching, who did not yet aspire to renounce the household life. Gautama Buddha usually began with basic levels of practice, followed by more refined levels. This teaching by Gautama Buddha is called the progressive instruction, a gradual instruction, Anupupikata. The gradual instruction is comprised by 5 factors, 3 exposition, kata, and 2 related subjects. The 3 expositions are follow. Dana kata. Dana kata is generosity or giving, charity, generosity, and so forth. Exposition on giving, dana kata. The second is sila kata. It's moral conduct, the exposition of moral conduct, or refrain from exploitation of others, and on refraining from causing social conflict and enmity. The third factor is saga kata, exposition on heaven or heavenly realms, being virtuous, a wholesome life which is endowed with happiness derived from sense objects, kamawatu. This exposition highlights those individuals, including celestial beings, who live an upright life and enjoy various levels of sense pleasure. This third factor is the result of generosity and moral conduct. It points to a sense of responsibility in recreating wholesome life in society and experience a healthy form of sensual happiness. This gradual teaching introduced those lay people in the audience to the highest goal that they are struggling to find. They were able to recognize that when one's lives or lives one's life in accord with the 5-2 principles of generosity and virtuous conduct, dana kata and sila kata, one will experience a faultless forms of happiness and enjoy abundant sense pleasures, as described in the third factor, and one thus achieves one's wishes. If the listener was prepared, the Gautama Buddha would have continued by describing the disadvantages of sense pleasure. Kama ati nawa. That's the negative aspect of sense pleasures. He would explain that however great the pleasure dependent on material objects may be, it is still a drawback or deficiency, paving the way to dukkha, to suffering and loss. When the listener understood this fourth factor well and wished for a way out, Gautama Buddha would describe the benefits of renouncing sense pleasure. Kekama ni samsa, the positive aspect of it, the benefits of it. He would point out the life of freedom, of independence from material things, and the unconstrained happiness which becomes a constant inner quality. The listener would then become receptive and aspire to reach the happiness independent of objects of sensuality. Ni rasamsa sukha. This is how Gautama Buddha would develop a receptivity and readiness in people. He would prepare their minds gradually in a way epitomized by the expression of O, cleansing and purifying a person's disposition. The Tipitaka states that when Gautama Buddha knew the minds of his listeners were receptive, malleable, and unclouded, joyous and bright, similar to a spotless cloth, ready to receive dye, he would teach the Four Noble Truths, Ariya Satcha. When their minds were open, he would impart panya, he would impart wisdom, enabling them to arrive at Satcha, the truth, Satcha Dhamma, to be a personal witness to truth, until there arose the Dhamma-I, Dhamma-Sakku. He would enter the community of noble ones, Ariya Pukala, from the stream enterers upwards. Most of these awakening individuals with the Dhamma-Sakku, Dhamma-I, continue to live lives of householders. They still enjoy sensuality, but it was a central happiness integrated with happiness independent of material things. Nira misa sukha. Which acts as a guarantee, preventing sensual form, causing harm, and indeed generating blessings and virtue. These noble beings act as pillars and exemplars, being examples, exercising authority in their communities. They advance without fail, without decline on the noble path. In some, however, delicious, sparking, refusing, remarkable, and desirable sense pleasure, kama sukha, or material happiness. samisa sukha may be, it still depends on external objects. It's not yet free and independent. It still involves some form of personal attachment and possession. Furthermore, in the insatiable search for sense gratification, other people are bent on pursuing the same object of pleasure, of which the finest and most desirable are of limited and inadequate number. People vying for these things treat each other with distrust, giving rise to disagreement, conflicts, zealous guarding of possessions, and oppression. If people do not know how to control their desires, this oppression intensifies, leading to increased distress and unbounded destruction. Even if one does own these material things to one's own content, they may disappear. And even if they do not disappear, they may lose their appeal, either by undergoing change themselves or as the result of change in the individual. In any case, they must eventually decline and disintegrate. They cannot be sustained in that desirable condition forever, and one must be separated from these things in the end. Hand in hand with sense pleasures comes worry and anxiety. Although people may experience sensual happiness to fulfillment apart from people's innate instability causing problems, that happiness itself is neither secure, reliable, nor replete. It is as if one is plagued by the embedded and infected splinter or barb that causes irritation and annoyance. The pleasure is mixed up with dukkha, suffering. The future is full of fear, false evidence appearing real, and anticipation. The past full of sorrow and regrets. It is not a pure, faultless, spacious, and complete form of happiness. Although more refined forms of happiness are internal, independent, pure, and harmless, if one's enjoyment of this happiness is still mixed with mental defilements, kalesas, one may succumb to indulgence, giving rise to heedlessness, apamado, and negligence, and neglect one's responsibility and well-being of one's community and will be undermined. Moreover, one may fall back into indulging in material pleasures and forget to put effort into spiritual practice in order to eliminate residual mental impurities, asavas, which are rooted of dukkha. One's practice will thus be faulty and compromised. Therefore, both sensual happiness and happiness independent of material things experienced by those who still have mental defilements, kalesas, is not yet truly free or complete. Because these people harbor a sense of self that gets caught up with things. They have not yet eradicated the root of suffering. They must engage in spiritual cultivation until they arrive at the destruction of the taints. Asawakaya, the state free from suffering, by which one does not grasp at anything. Nothing sticks to the mind, just as water does not stick to a lotus leaf. A person's body lives in the world, but the mind transcends the world. One passes beyond both suffering and happiness, dependent on sensation, vedana, including refined sensation generated in the mind. One reaches supreme happiness, which does not involve feeding on the sensation. This happiness is completely satisfying, and it is itself complete. It can be compared to a perfectly physical health. Nothing disturbs or irritates the mind. It is clear, calm, pure, bright, and at ease. When one has reached utter and total freedom, there is no self to get entangled in anything. One is happy in every situation. Nothing remains to be done in respect to personal desires. If one seeks out happiness, this is done for the sake of the world, for the well-being and happiness of all beings. This is the supreme happiness, freedom from dukkha, suffering. It lies beyond the reach of affliction, and it constitutes the highest goal of every human being. Despite the drawbacks and disadvantages of sense pleasures, it is still one form of happiness, which has a bearing on the majority of people, because of its potential for causing dukkha, suffering, both for individual and for society. It is very important to guard against and to rectify any harm it creates. In sum, sense pleasures must be managed carefully. People ought to be encouraged to develop themselves in order to experience higher forms of happiness. The skillful management of sense pleasure is necessary asset as beginning stages of practice. Although sense pleasures contain defects, it can still benefit one's life and help lead to peaceful coexistence with others. Moreover, it is the basis for which people can develop themselves and discover greater beings. For this reason, in systematic presentations of sukha, of happiness, well-managed sense pleasures is classified as the basic benefits, atta, which is to be aspired to and to reach. It is referred to as present benefit, ditta dhammakata, a visible, obvious, immediate benefit. The benefit here refers to precisely to the happiness derived from material things. Present benefit, ditta dhammakata, refers to the happiness on the material level, rupa dhamma. It is tied up with material things, vatu, which objects of gratification and consumable things. Moreover, it pertains to communal living, to create wholesome, supportive, interpersonal relationship. In sum, these benefits involve diligence in performing one's work and in earning one's living. In order to obtain enough material wealth to look after oneself, one's family, and one's dependents so that everyone is at ease. Maintaining wholesome social relationships and communal harmony, having a respectable position in society, in addition to receiving honor and prestige, and having a supportive retinue or staff. Sustaining one's family in comfort, establishing one's family as a respectable model for others in a way conducive to the beings of society. Taking care of one's body, for instance, by exercising and showing moderation in eating, so that one lives life without illness and remains healthy. In regard to more refined happiness, such as internal independent of material things, niramisa sukha, it is too is a benefit and aspiration for life, referred to as samparayikata, future benefit, spiritual benefit, profound benefit, or inconspicuous benefit. In terms of present benefit, the happiness resulting from having abundant consumable goods is obvious for all to see. But in terms of spiritual benefit, helping another person to escape from suffering leads to even greater rejoicing and delight. Similarly, freely feeling deeply moved and inspired by truth and goodness, with their accompanying joy and peace and a spiritual happiness not clearly visible to others. Moreover, such happiness connected to the virtue bears results in future lives, which are also inconspicuous. For these reasons, it's referred to as samparayikata, inconspicuous benefit, or the future benefit. The meaning of the term samparayikata includes all forms of internal, refined forms of happiness, beginning with the joy derived from faith, sattva, from living a virtuous life, sila, from concentration, samadhi, and from concentration absorption, jhana, all the way up to the happiness of nibbita sukha. For this reason, in most sutras, only two kinds of benefits are mentioned, the present benefit and the future benefit. It is suitable when teaching people in general to describe the happiness that they are familiar with in their everyday lives, and it introduces higher forms of happiness in a way that is easy to understand. As I mentioned earlier, such of the happiness classified as independent or non-material, naramisa sukha, is not yet complete. It is still subject to reversal, potentially mixed up with attachment and heedlessness, apamado. Therefore, in relation to those people who have a good basis of understanding, it is sometimes necessary to make more detailed distinction. In this case, the true happiness of extinction obtains asavakaya, the happiness of the arihats, or the happiness of nipita, is distinguished from samparayikata and given the name supreme benefit, paramata. In some, this term atta, which refers to the purpose of the objective of life, can be divided simply into two kinds: visible benefit and inconspicuous spiritual benefit, including the supreme benefit. A more detailed division, however, is into three kinds. Ditta Dhamma Kata comprises physical health, material possessions, honor, friendship, and happiness home. That's the visible benefit. Samparayikata is the inconspicuous benefit, emphasizing having a wholesome, refined, happy mind by way of spiritual development. And paramata, the supreme benefit, refers to having a comprehensive wisdom leading to pure purity, clarity, happiness, and liberation. Besides encouraging people to gradually reach these three kinds of benefit, Gautama Buddha also taught to broaden one's perspective so that one develop these benefits not only for oneself, but also for the sake of others. There is thus a second group of three benefits. Atta, self-benefit, to generate above the three kinds of benefit for oneself, to develop oneself in order to reach these three benefits. Paramata, benefits of others, to assist others in reaching the three above benefits by supporting them in spiritual self-development. And upayata, mutual benefit, the shared benefits and assets of the community of society, including a shared environment, which should be nurtured and cared for in order to support oneself and others in reaching the three aforementioned benefits. Due to the importance of how sense pleasures is managed and engaged with, Gautama Buddha gave teachings to the householders on spiritual qualities leading to the present benefit, for example, on how to deal with material possessions in the correct and supportive manner. These teachings scattered throughout the Tipitaka. When provided teaching on visible benefits, besides emphasizing liberating wisdom, Ni Sarana Panya, Gautama Buddha also combined teachings of quality conducive to spiritual benefits, Samparayikata. This is because the quality accompany refined happiness as they guaranteed both to prevent sense pleasures from harming oneself or preventing it from harming others or society. Instead, people will be able to apply their enjoyment of sense pleasures to assist others and to provide their well-being. Moreover, these teachings remind people to make the effort in developing more refined forms of happiness. There are various names for the factors conducive to development by householder in spiritual benefit, including the supreme benefit, which help to regulate people's relationships to sense pleasure. The chief of these terms is Aryavati, noble growth. There are 5 such factors. The first, Sattva, faith, firm confidence in the blessing of the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, the Taratanatai, the gifts of the lives of the face of the Tathagata awakening. Tathagata Bodhisattva, faith and wisdom of Gautama Buddha, of the Buddha, which enables people to be awakened themselves. It is equivalent to confidence in human nature, which can be trained in the point of excellence of comprehensive wisdom and liberation. This confidence is considered the starting point of spiritual developments. Sila, virtuous conduct, to conduct one's life in a harmless way by upholding 5 precepts, which may be developed into the 8 precepts. Sutta, learning, to listen, to reflect on, to analyze teachings in order to gain an essential understanding of them, especially those teachings conducive to spiritual growth. Sakha, generosity, charity, relinquishment, to lead the household life without being miserable. being receptive to the suffering of others and ready to share what one has to offer assistance. And the fifth, panya, wisdom, to gain a comprehensive understanding of the truth, to have insight into arising and dissolution, to eradicate oneself from unwholesome states, to reach a state where mental defilements, kalesas, find no footing, to be able to bring suffering to cessation. Of these 5 factors, the 4 essential factors of faith, virtuous conduct, generosity, and wisdom, learning here is considered expedient but optional. Of course, it is favorable to have learning, especially to be one of the great learning, Bahu Sutta, but technically this factor is indispensable. Panya, wisdom, is the paramount factor. When wisdom is present, there is less reliance on formal learning. By same token, no matter how much one has learned, if one lacks panya, if one lacks wisdom, one cannot reach the true success. In any other case, the 5 factors are considered assets to one's life. Of the various teachings in the Tipitaka on managing sense pleasures, there is one long teaching comprises in the Singhalaka Sutra, which describes a system for conducting one's life as a householder in reference to one's immediate family, to one's community, and to society in general. The commentators say that the sutta constitute a discipline for lay people, Gehi Vinaya, or a code of living for noble beings. At the start of the Singhalaka Sutra, Gautama Buddha refers to the code of living as noble disciple, Arya Vinaya. At the end of the sutra, he speaks on a verse describing the principles for building society's stability, social stability and harmony, which are the 4 bases of social solidarity. Sanghavatu. Giving gifts, kindly speech, wholesome deeds, impartiality in all things towards those worthy of such support. One should practice these 4 things properly. These 4 things are people's mainstay in the world, similar to the axe pin of a moving chariot. If they did not exist, no mother from her son would receive honor or respect, nor father either. Since the wise uphold these favorable qualities, they attain to a state of distinction. They are rightly praised by all. Both the teachings on noble growth and on the 4 bases of social solidarity pertain to a refined form of central happiness, which acts as a link between material benefit and spiritual benefit. In shorter teachings by Gautama Buddha, however, material benefits or present benefits, Ditta Dhammikata, usually refers to material wealth, because economic factors are such central importance in life of householders, and they incorporate almost all facets of lay person's life. When looking on only at these select sutras, it is thus easy to get an impression that present benefits refer exclusively to material wealth. Below are some additional teaching by Gautama Buddha on the present benefits. Some of these emphasize material wealth, while others act as the bridge to realize spiritual benefit. To begin with, however, let us look at the sutra in which present benefit refers to another aspect of sense pleasure, not tied up with material wealth. Here, the emphasis is on attending to one's own physical health. Gautama Buddha was residing in Savatthi, in Jetavana's grove, in Bharat. On the occasion, King Prasennathi of Kosala had eaten a pot measured of rice and delicacies. Then when he had finished eating, cramped and discomforted, the king approached the Blessed One, paid homage to him, and sat to one side. Then the Blessed One, having understood that King Prasennathi had eaten and was cramped and discomforted, and on the occasion recited this verse: when a man is always mindful, knowing moderation in food he eats, his ailments duly diminish, He ages slowly, and he lives long. Now, on the occasion that the Brahmin youth Sutta Sana was standing behind King Prasatini of Kosala, the king addressed him thus: "Come now, dear Sutta Sana, learn this verse from the Blessed One and recite it to me whenever I am taking my meal. I will then present you daily with 100 kahapanas as a cost for the meal." "Yes, sire," the Brahmin youth Suttasana replied. Having learned the verse from the Blessed One Gautama, whenever King Prasatini was taking his meal, the Brahmin youth Suttasana recited it. Then the king Prasatini of Kosala gradually restrained himself until his intake of food was at most a small pot measure of boiled rice. At a later time, when his body had become energetic and spurry, King Prasatini of Kosala stroked his limbs with his hand, and on that occasion uttered this inspired utterance: "The Blessed One showed compassion towards me in regard to both kinds of good, the present good and the higher good." The following sutra on presents benefits describes a proper engagement with sense pleasures and emphasizes the relationship to material wealth. But it too provides a link to a higher spiritual benefit. Note that this sutra was given to a wealthy merchant, Anata Pintika, who was a Sotapanna, a stream enterer, one who has realized the stream. Note also that in regard to the first three kinds of happiness below, the term clansman is used, while in regard to the fourth kind of happiness, the term noble disciple is used, indicating a rise to higher spiritual development. Then the householder Antatipataka approached the Blessed One, paid homage to him, sat on one side. The Blessed One said to him, "Householder, there are these four kinds of happiness that may regularly achieved by a layperson who enjoys sensual pleasures." "What for?" "The happiness of owning wealth, Ati Sukha. The happiness of spending wealth for consumption, Bocha Sukha. The happiness of freedom from debt, Anana Sukha. And the happiness of blameless action, Anavacha Sukha." And what, householder, is the happiness of ownership? Here the clansman has acquired wealth by energetic striving, amassed by the streams of his arms, earned by the sweats of his brows, righteously gained. When he thinks, "I have acquired wealth by energetic striving, righteously gained," he experienced joyness and happiness. This is called the happiness of ownership. And what is the happiness of consumption? Here, when the wealth acquired by energetic striving, amused by strength of his arms, earned by the sweat of his brow, righteous wealth righteously gained, a clansman enjoys his wealth and does meritorious deeds. When he thinks, with this wealth acquired by energetic striving, righteously gained, "I enjoy my wealth and do meritorious deeds," he experiences happiness and joy. This is called happiness of consumption. What is the happiness of freedom from debt? Here a clansman has no debt to anyone. When large or small, when he thinks, "I have no debts to anyone," whether large or small, he experiences happiness and joy. This is called the happiness of freedom from debt. What is the happiness of blamelessness? Here a householder, a noble disciple endowed with blameless bodily, verbally, and mental action, when he thinks, "I am endowed in blamelessly, body and verbally and mental action," he experiences happiness and joy. This is called the happiness of blameless. Having realized the happiness, freedom from debt, one should recall the happiness of ownership. While spending one's wealth, one sees clearly the happiness of material wealth. When seeing things clearly, the wise one knows both kinds of happiness and sees that the other three are not worth a 16th part of the blissless of the blamelessness. The following sutra makes a clear distinction between present benefits and spiritual benefits, the latter acting on both support and constraint for the former. On the occasion, the Blessed One was dwelling amongst the Koli clans, near the Kolian town named Katarapata. The young Kolian Dika Janu approached the Blessed One, paid homage to him, and sat on one side. And he said, Venerable Sir, we are laymen, enjoy sensual pleasures. Having a home in the house full of children, we use sandalwood from Kasi. We wear garlands, scents, and unguents. We welcome gold and silver, that the Blessed One teaches the Dhamma in the way that will lead our welfare and happiness in this present life and in the future. There are examples of blameless actions, including keeping the Uposatha observance, assisting and serving others, establishing public parks, planting woodlands, and building bridges. These four things that lead to the welfare and happiness of the clansman in this present life. What for? Accomplished by accomplishing diligence, accomplishing protection, good friendship, and balanced living. What is the accomplishing diligence? Here, whatever made by the means by which a clanman earns his living, whether by farming, trade, raising cattle, military service, government service, or some other craft, he is skillful, diligent. He possesses sound judgment in order to carry out and arrange it properly. This is called the accomplishment of diligence. What is the accomplishment in protection? Here, a clansman sets up protections, guards over wealth, and has acquired through perseverance, amused by strength of his arms, earned by the sweat of his brow. Righteousness, wealth, righteously gained, thinking, how can I prevent kings from confiscating it, thieves from stealing it, fire from burning it, floods from sweeping it off, displeasing heirs from squandering it. This is called the accomplishment in protection. What is a good friendship? Here, in whatever village or town a clanman live, he is associated with householders and their sons, both young and old, who are mature in conduct, who are endowed with faith, virtuous behavior, generosity, and wisdom. He converses with them and consults with them insofar as they are accomplished in faith. He emulates them with respect to their accomplishment in faith insofar as they are accomplished in virtuous behavior. He emulates them with respect to their accomplishment in virtuous behavior insofar as they are accomplished in generosity. He emulates them with respect to their accomplishment in generosity insofar as they are accomplished in panya, wisdom. He emulates them with respect to their accomplishment in panya, in wisdom. This is called a good friendship. What is a balanced living? Here, a clansman leads a balanced living of life, living neither too extravagantly nor faulty. He knows the way of wealth increases and declines. He's aware. In this way, my income will exceed my expenditures rather than the reverse. Just as the appraiser or his apprentice holding up a scale knows by so much he has dipped down, by so much it has gone up. In this way, the clansman has a small income, but lives luxuriously. Others would say to him, this clansman eats his wealth just like the eater of figs. If he has a large income but lives austerely, others would say of him, this clansman may even die as a pauper. But it is called balanced living when a clansman leads to the balanced life. See here, the wealth thus righteously gained has four pathways to ruin. Apaya mukha, womanizing, drunkenness, gambling, and bad friendship. Bad companions, bad comradeship, just as if there were a large reservoir with 4 inlets and 4 outlets. And a man would close the inlets and open the outlets. The insufficient rain does not fall. One could expect the water in the reservoir to decrease rather than increase. The wealth thus righteously acquired has 4 pathways to gain. One avoids womanizing, drunkenness, gambling, and cultivate good friendship, good companionship, good comradeship, just if there were a large reservoir with 4 inlets and 4 outlets. The man would open the inlets and close the outlets. Sufficient rain falls, one should expect the water in the reservoir to increase rather than to decrease. These are the 4 things that lead to the welfare and happiness of a clansman in this very life. There are these 4 things that lead to the welfare and happiness of a clansman in the future. What for? Accomplishment in faith, accomplishment in virtuous behavior, accomplishment in generosity, accomplishment in wisdom. What are the accomplishments in faith? Here, Clanman endowed with faith, he places faith in the awakening of the Tathagata. Thus, the Blessed One is an Arihat, the Enlightened One, the Exalted One. He is called accomplishment in Sattva, in faith. What is the accomplishment in Sila, virtuous conduct? Here, a clansman abstains from the destruction of life, abstains from intoxicant, abstains from that is spirits and alcoholic beverage, which is the basis for apamado, heedlessness. This is called the accomplishment in virtuous conduct. What is the accomplishment in generosity? Here, a clanman dwells at home with the heart devoid of stain of miserliness, freely, generously, open-handed, delighting in relinquishment, one devoted to charity, delightment in giving and sharing. This is called accomplishment in generosity. What is the accomplishment in panya, wisdom? Here, a clanman is wise. He possesses wisdom that discerns arising and passing away, which is noble and penetrative, that leads to complete destruction of dukkha, suffering. This is called the accomplishment in panya, in wisdom. See here, these are the four things that lead to welfare and happiness of a clansman in the future. In comprising in this occupation, heedful in his management, balanced in the way of living, he safeguards the wealth he earns, endowed with faith, accomplished in virtue, charitable, devoid of miserliness. He constantly purifies the path that leads to safety in the future. Thus, these 8 qualities of the faithful householder are said to be the truthful one, to lead to happiness in both ways, to good and welfare in the very life, and to happiness in the future. Thus, for the dwelling at home, their generosity and their merit increases. Although still enjoying sense pleasures, when lay people are able to engage with this enjoyment and in the way that generates present benefits, they gain familiarity with more refined spiritual benefits. It can be expected that they will prosper and experience a reliable, harmless form of happiness. Moreover, they will help to generate a social, lasting well-being and prosperity. I'm going to leave off at that is the end of part 2 of 11.3. Page 1023 to page 1115, the end of part 11.3, part 2.